meeting of the City of San Angelo Development Corporation to be held on February 6, 2023 at 8:30.
Hang on just a sec, Max.
Yes, sir.
And they got the technology going?
I
I don't know.
They can see it in front of them, but we just can't see it on that back screen.
Okay, so, and in the terms of for public stuff, we're good, right? Yeah.
This is going out, right? We're good? Should be. Let me check.
Okay.
Well, let's pull YouTube up and find out.
And then I'll record you recording YouTube, so then which dimension are we in?
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those.
Are we good? All right, good. We'll start over. Notice is hereby given of a regular meeting of the City of San Angelo Development Corporation to be held on February 6, 2023 at 8:30 a.m. at the East Mezzanine of City Hall, 72 West College Avenue, San Angelo, Texas, for the purpose of considering the following agenda items. One, we'll call the meeting to order. It is 8:31. Director Ceballos, will you please lead us in prayer?
Lord, thank you for another beautiful day here in San Angelo, Texas. I ask for you to take care of those who are in need and have suffered during this winter time and other challenges they may be facing. Let us guide us with your strength and help us do work here today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. 3, public comment. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Board members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The board takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, the regular agenda. A, consideration and possible actions of notices of default and foreclosure proceedings regarding affordable housing program properties and authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute all necessary documents to preserve Costa DC's liens on such properties, including the expenditure of affordable housing program funds. Presentation by Brandon Dyson, Deputy City Attorney.
Thank you. So last meeting I mentioned this. Shortly before that meeting, I had received 4 notices from Pinnacle Bank on borrowers who are under the affordable housing program. And those notices were because those borrowers were delinquent. We're the second lien on those properties. Costa DC, under the affordable housing program, will pay a certain amount of closing costs and like a down payment, but our lien's subordinate to the primary mortgage on those properties. So that's why we got the notice. Since then, I've been talking to the attorney for the bank and trying to work something out. We haven't got as far as we had hoped. Doesn't mean they're not willing to still work on this with us, but we just haven't got as much information as we needed. I've passed around a worksheet that kind of shows what the principal amount on each of these properties is for the primary loan, and then also the Costa DC loan. What I'm missing is the current payoff from the bank. We have to have that information from them, and that's what we haven't gotten yet. So I just want to bring this to y'all today. One of the things the attorney did tell me is that these properties, these people are habitually late. There's one where they've sent out notices like 12 times, and eventually they get it paid off. So this may be much ado about nothing, because they may get it paid off, and there's nothing further for us to do. But I didn't want to do nothing and then have us lose out on our lien interest on this deal. So normally the way our lien works under the affordable housing program is we do a standard note and deed of trust just like you would with a regular mortgage, but each month so long as they're maintaining the property, using it as their primary residence, then we forgive the monthly payment over the course of their loan, and so they don't end up paying anything so long as they're doing that. However, a default under their primary mortgage is technically a default under our lien too, and so we could also send out these notices of default. But since the bank has already initiated this process, I think there's a couple options, none of them super good, but if the bank ends up foreclosing, then because we're the subordinate lien, if at the foreclosure they don't get enough proceeds to pay them off plus us off, then our lien's wiped out, and we have no other interest in the property. Now, we could, we still have the note, so we could go after the borrower, but that would mean litigation. We'd have to sue to get that back. So the attorney for the bank thinks that they'd probably be willing to work with us after. Oh, so the other part is the deadline in their notices is today. And I want you to know we have been working on this since we got these, but we got them shortly before our meeting. I followed up with them the same day that we had our last meeting and asked for a contact for the bank. Didn't hear from them for a little while, so I had to follow up again. Finally got a contact last week, and Bob's made contact with him, Bob Solis, our Neighborhood and Family Services Director, and hasn't heard back from the bank representative yet. So it's not for lack of trying. We also, Bob had talked to Galilee, who is the contractor on these affordable homes. They build these homes, and they have relationships with these borrowers, and we're trying to see if they could help at all. I mean, they're willing to help, but they reached out to the borrowers, and they're not willing to, sell the property back and do kind of like a rental situation. They were wanting to keep their property as is, so not much there. I guess our options would be, we could, under our deed of trust, we're able to pay any delinquency under their primary mortgage and get them caught up, and then we turn around and would collect that amount from the borrower. So if you look on the last page of the handout, the total current delinquency on all these properties is $5,161.85. That would just be to get them caught up. Now, a month or two from now, if they don't make their payments, we may be right back here again if they don't stay caught up, and also if they don't pay us back if we make those payments on their behalf. Another alternative would be to actually buy the note from the bank, and that way we're in the primary position. Now, on the top of that last page handout, you'll see the total primary loan original principal amount. That's what all the loans started at. I mean, that should of course be less now. Most of these loans were from 2016. I think one is 2010. So that should be reduced. But again, we don't know what the payoff is without the bank giving us that information.
So trying to understand this, each of these homeowners received a loan from the bank of $60,000 plus or minus.
Yep,
And then we gave them an additional loan
that's right.
of, in the neighborhood of $40,000 so that they could purchase this home.
That's right.
And now what we're seeing, what I don't understand is why the appraised value of these homes dropped by 30%
Yep.
in 1 year.
So I found that curious as well. Tina, our finance director, she called the appraisal district, and apparently there is a change in state law, which I haven't looked at, so I didn't know this, but the appraisal district, because they're affordable homes, they have to appraise them at a reduced rate or closer in line with what their primary mortgage is. So that's why that dropped according to the appraisal district.
Okay, but the actual value of the properties
Is probably more. So,
Right.
I mean, if we got those properties back and sold it, I mean, I don't think we'd be limited to selling it for anything like that. I mean, if it came back into the affordable housing program, then I guess it would still retain that value.
Good morning, Board. Tina Piercy, Director of Finance. I did speak with Tyler, who's our chief appraiser, about these evaluations. He did say that if he put them in under his regular model, they would be valued somewhere between 149 and 167 between the 4 different properties. So it's not the value of the home. The state law that requires that is so that the people who can afford these lower reduced mortgages can also afford to pay their taxes.
So it's like a backdoor exemption in terms of, yeah, okay. So, Brandon, if we do nothing and they default, then the loans we had against those properties basically, well, I mean, if the bank forecloses on them and sells them for $150,000, there
Yeah.
should be enough funds there to cover what they're owed and cover what we're owed.
That's right. So if they foreclose, they get enough proceeds to first pay off the expenses of doing the foreclosure. That gets paid first. I don't know what those would be. It's based on the attorney's fees and their publication notices and things like that. That all gets paid first. Then the primary loan would get paid, and then any excess proceeds should go to us first, and then if there's any other liens on the property, then it would go next. But if it does sell at foreclosure for not enough, then our lien is wiped out because it's a junior lien, and our only recourse would be to collect from the borrower themselves through initiating a lawsuit.
Without knowing anything more, it seems to me that would be a rather futile effort.
Probably so.
So that's if we do nothing. So what are the possible courses of action we could follow as an alternative to that?
So, two possible courses I see. One is pay off the current delinquencies, which kind of just buys us time. Hopefully, we turn around and collect what we pay on their behalf from them, and then they continue to make their regular payments like they should. Being with the history that I've been told, as this being a constant thing, that's probably not what's going to happen. The other course would be to buy the note on these properties and become the first lien holders, so we have the primary loan on it. But again, if we're not getting paid timely and things like that, we would have to foreclose and go through all that hassle. But we would retain the property in the end if it didn't sell, or if it did sell, then we'd get paid off.
Brandon, if the development corporation did take that course of action and buy out the bank's loan, would we still have the requirement to go through affordable housing to liquidate the property, or does it become our real estate, and do we end up being a business endeavor in that, or does it fall into the same real estate qualifications as, say, the industrial park?
Yeah, I mean, at this, we'd be using affordable housing funds to pay off these notes, I think. And so, that's a tough question.
That's
I think
a good question.
that's
I assume that they would retain their character as affordable housing assets. But that's a good question. If we didn't use affordable housing budget to pay these off, would the character of the assets change and become general assets of the corporation?
I mean, I would think so, yeah, but if we're using the affordable housing program funds, then I'd want to research that.
The only thing is with that, the loan we made that we forgive a little bit every month, technically, from an accounting perspective, we would consider that an asset, and that would still be an asset that we would say is in the character of the affordable housing funding.
Also, are we
Would
legally
you-
able to use other funds to pay
Would you
off?
use the microphone, please?
Is it a legal use of type B funds to pay those off? Or would we have to
Yeah,
use
I mean,
affordable housing?
If we're buying it and we're not intending it for some kind of project, which affordable housing is a ballot approved project, but those funds are set aside each year, I think, so.
That's a good point. Bob has characterized the market for affordable housing as there are plenty of customers out there that are in need of affordable housing. Is that consistent with what you would say, Mari? And so I think if we regain control of these, that there would be in fact, he called it a waiting list of qualified citizens who would be able to participate in this program. I think that Galilee handles that, right? And so there are ways to run this back through another cycle or another generation of affordable housing. But that's a good question. What type of assets do they?
Dr. Jones mentioned, so right now, looking at it, we're a little over 5,000 in arrears, right, that we're holding on, but the total amount that's out is the current payoff, is that the 165, 844, am I correct?
So that one is for our notes. The Costa DC notes is the 165.
Okay, I guess, what's our liability? What's our total liability?
So without knowing the bank's payoff, just going by what the original note amounts were plus our payoff would be 407,844.
Okay, but how much money did we put in? We didn't put in the
We put in
407,
the
right?
179,803.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now we're, in terms of money that we're in, if this was poker, it's 165, 844 we have left, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
that's
that's
right.
what I was trying to figure out.
Michael or Bob, and I don't want to take up a lot of time. For me, because I'm fairly new and I haven't heard a lot about this, and there may be a couple of us up here that in the back of our minds may want to know, why are we in this business?
This was an item on the ballot, the most recent ballot, to dedicate was it 330? How much a year? 330 or 335? 335 a year in sales tax revenue for affordable housing programs. And go ahead, Bob.
I was just saying that also carried over that also carried over from the 2004 ballot. It was carried forward, and an amount was put on it at that time.
Okay, thank you.
So, Brandon, so we have 4 properties that are in arrears. How many properties do we have in the program right now? You know?
I'd probably have to ask Mari about that.
Mari, we broadcast, please. Use the mic.
I'm not sure how many we have exactly, but we've built over, I think, 100 since 2005.
Okay. So say ballpark 100 properties that we, as Costa DC, have an interest in?
Well, some of them have already sold. Like
Okay.
if the client moves out of town, they sell their house, they pay off the bank note, and then they pay off our portion of the note, and we deposit that back into the Affordable Housing Fund to go towards the next client.
But yeah, but just to clarify, of those 100, we're not necessarily a part of all of those, right?
Correct.
But I'm just curious, like what percentage of this, you know what I mean? Like, so we have 4 out of 40, so that would be 10%. Is it 4 out of 100, so it's 4%?
I think about 15 or so have sold
Okay,
since the program started.
okay.
And
So there-
nobody's been forgiven completely yet, because that's not old enough yet.
Okay. So there might be like 80 properties or so that we have some kind of interest in as a corporation? Okay. So this is maybe 2% of our portfolio, so to speak? Right, okay.
So this is way outside the box, but if these properties, for whatever reason, whatever decision we make, are no longer in the affordable housing umbrella, they become just real property of the development corporation, could we retain those properties for use to rent to employees coming in to take new jobs, that sort of thing? Would that put us back under the umbrella of what we do?
Maybe. We'd have to look at that and see if that would be, normally we aren't allowed to operate a project like as a going business concern. I think there is some authorization for lease situations, so maybe, Bob, you?
Yeah, I'm thinking of that, and affordable housing is a specific set aside under Part B. If we get into taking them out of the affordable housing realm, I'm not sure, we may be getting crossways with the state. I'm just not sure.
Don't get me wrong, I don't want to go into the real estate business. I don't think that's what we're here for, but I'm just trying to find possible answers for all of it.
Can I ask a question about the recourses that Dr. Jones had? So right now, it's either pay back, right, the arrears to get them current, and then we keep our fingers crossed and get paid back. Option one.
That's right.
Option two is to not do that and let the first lien holder play the scenario out, and if they foreclose, whatever, we may or may not get paid.
Right.
And then option three would be for us to purchase the entire thing and become the first lien holder and then have more control over it.
Right.
So following up, under option 2, where the first lien holder forecloses, and we may or may not get paid what we've loaned against the property, what happens to the properties? Do they stay in the program?
No. I mean, if we do nothing else and they get sold at foreclosure, then it's
They
free
get
and
sold to
clear.
an investor or an owner occupant?
They could, yeah.
And they leave the program?
Yes.
Well, I'm concerned about houses that we've used taxpayer money to invest in the program, leaving the program, because I think there's a clearly understood need for affordable housing in our community. I'd hate
Yeah.
to see that happen. At the same time, I'm concerned about kind of the moral hazard aspect of our decision here, creating an incentive where people realize that if they enter into an agreement with us, take out a loan from us as well as a bank or their mortgage company, that, should they not make all of their payments, that can would just be kicked down the road indefinitely, and we would sop up anything that's in arrears. I'm concerned about that, especially if we've got 80 properties.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if that's a proper use of the taxpayers' money as well.
I personally like the idea of buying the note and being in the first position. However, the other side of that, my concern would be then we're using funds that could be allocated for future projects that then, we're minimizing the impact we could have by kind of bailing out, these loans at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, if that was the course of action to buy the notes, I would definitely want to do the research to address John's question about having to keep it in the program, because if we had to keep it in the program and we paid off the primary mortgage plus what we had sunk into it, but couldn't turn around and resell it, then we would, not be getting that money back. So,
So if we're to pay the 5,000 and plus, we buy them a little time, do they have to do a new agreement, an amendment saying, hey, you got to, pay this off? First get up to current and then start, an extra $50 a month? How does that work?
So in our deed of trust with the borrowers, it allows us to cure their defaults, and then under that agreement, they're required to pay us what we paid on their behalf. So,
But it doesn't say how, right? They're required to pay it, but does it add a little bit more a month? Do they get a separate note, or it's like, hey, well, I owe you $1,000, I'll send you $1 a month,
Yeah.
Is there a...
as far as like getting calculated into our
how
loan
is-
with them?
Yeah, I guess my question is there rules of how they have to pay it, right? Like back, or it's, well, you owe this, but...
I would send them, if we paid it, I would send them a notice saying, you're in default under our mortgage. We paid this amount on your behalf, and it's due within 30 days.
Okay.
Or else we initiate our foreclosure proceedings. That's what the deed of trust provides is,
Okay.
just like if they missed a payment to us, if it wasn't
Right.
forgiven, if they missed a payment, we'd send them that notice of default, allow them to cure for 30 days, and then if they don't, that's when you accelerate the note, which means it's all due now, and go to foreclosure proceedings, so.
But we'd still be the second lien holder in that case?
Yeah, so, okay, if we foreclosed, say the bank was out of it, they were just in default under ours, and we foreclosed, then anybody that bought it, if they didn't buy it with enough proceeds to pay off the primary mortgage, then they buy it subject to that mortgage. So eventually, they have to, start making payments to that bank.
Where would we be?
Or if it doesn't get sold at the foreclosure and we keep it because we get a credit for the amount of our loan, then we have it subject to that primary loan, and we'd have to be making payments to the bank.
Well, I think, you know.
But it would be ours.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think from a real estate perspective, you know, the market, the way it's been the last couple of years, these properties, without looking at them, obviously, or whatever, I would expect that they're worth a lot more than what it says here. I guess to the point of, they're probably worth at least 150 each if we use that as a ballpark. So using these numbers between the bank's loan, which we don't know, but we're gonna, even if it's close to the original amount, and it's close to ours, we're totally in it between both us, our note and the bank's note for less than 100. So if they were to foreclose and sell it even at 100, which is way below market value, everyone should get paid out, I think.
Well, I think we also have to consider if we, put good money after bad, so to speak, and invest additional resources in these 4 properties, that ties up funds, especially if we ended up assuming ownership of them, that ties up funds that could be used to build additional new housing programs. I would imagine Galilee is ready to go, could build more as time goes by, so I think we have to keep that in mind.
Clifton, if the foreclosures happened and we ended up being sole owners of the properties, does that change those properties from affordable housing to traditional real estate?
Yeah, that we're not sure on.
I mean, so I think there's 2 situations. One is if we're buying the primary note with affordable housing funds, that's where I'm worried about it, the character of it still being affordable housing. If it goes through the foreclosure process, I mean, I think it's free and clear at that point. I mean, if the primary lender's foreclosing, I mean, I think it's definitely free and clear. If we're foreclosing, I mean, that's the whole point of us having a note and deed of trust, just like any other entity does, is being able to get that property back. So I don't think we would have to, in that scenario, keep it in the affordable housing if we went through the foreclosure process.
I think that it's important for us to bear in mind the basic premise of the affordable housing program, that these homes were built in fill-in lots in neighborhoods that needed revitalization. Some are clusters, but that's still the general character of the neighborhood was something that we were attempting to accelerate for tax roll purposes and just bringing fresh activity. It has stimulated, the program has stimulated a lot of neighboring properties owners into revitalizing their own properties. I haven't heard yet mention of any property inspections related to these foreclosures, and if these homes are in any deteriorating condition, as is often the case when a loan starts to go into default. But if the corporation, and realize I'm speaking this from the heartfelt compassion for the people who were trying to become homeowners, because the program's also for first-time homeowners. So with that being said, to preclude any further deterioration of the property, foreclosure may be the healthiest thing for the neighborhood, for the asset, but still, and admittedly, it's public perception, do we end up looking like the bad guys for closing on the loan?
Well, to your point, I think we're faced with 3 difficult scenarios, no matter how we slice it. I think the least amount of damage, and I would not call it kicking down the road, but giving the 30 days, it's $5,200, right? It's a drop in the bucket in terms of budget. We get them up, they have 30 days to fix it. If they don't, then we start the proceedings. I mean, we give them just a little more time. Getting into the business of buying these houses, I don't think that's something we really want to do. I think right now that, for the short term, that gives the tenants the best opportunity. And if they can't meet it, well then the recourses are in place and we did our best.
Do we have any indication the banks are going to more quickly than that 30 days?
So the next step in their process, so today's the deadline to cure the default, meaning to just pay the delinquency. They can accept payments after today, of course, and they probably have and probably would. But if they didn't, then the next part in the foreclosure process is they have to send out a notice of acceleration, meaning your whole amount's due now, and then they have to post it for foreclosure at the courthouse, and that has to be a minimum of 21 days before that can happen. So that would be the next step. And John, to your point about the property inspections, that's kind of the nature of foreclosures, buyer beware. You don't get to go in and inspect it. We would have no idea about the condition of the house, and in fact, a lot of times, even after somebody buys it at foreclosure, you have to go evict the people. And so that's a whole nother process. That's a quicker process than foreclosure, but that's still more time and expense that you may have to put in if they don't get out.
So another question, so the last two properties, the third and fourth properties there, Lily and Coberlin, are over $1,000 in arrears versus the other two. So I'm assuming they've been in arrears longer?
Yeah, I would
because
think
the
so.
amounts are the same. So, I mean, are we, for the first two, are we looking at, is that, 60 days, 90 days? What are we looking at? Do we know?
It has the dates, I think, on the front,
the
since
front
their
one.
delinquency, right? 110, or 117, is that?
No, that's just, I think that's the date. They're all January.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying, how many months are they?
So in the notice from the bank, they just put the delinquency as of a certain date.
Right.
And so, I can't tell how many months or if they've made partial payments during a month or anything like that.
You raise a good point, Max, that's as of that date, and it's likely to be higher this month.
Let's say that again?
That delinquency as of that
Right.
January
All right,
date.
so it should be even more at this point.
Oh, yeah, so they did provide a per diem amount, so I've tried to calculate that through today.
Okay.
And so, I think the totals you see there, that would be through today.
The 516185 is through today?
Yes, sir.
So by pursuing that path, covering the delinquencies, gives the homeowners a little bit of time to take what steps they can to get current with us.
Yeah, they'd have to pay us back. And then,
then-
of course,
then
the
they have the
next month,
ongoing
they
note
have to
with-
pay the bank. I mean, they have to keep current too, so.
I think that scenario is more in spirit with what we're supposed to do. And I, again, don't want to get into the landlord business or the real estate ownership business, so I would approve a motion to do just that, to pay off the delinquent and give them some more time.
I'd second it.
So just for my, I guess, clarification, Brandon, so I guess the logistics of it, I'm maybe getting a little hung up with, but, so let's say they have a payment, monthly, I don't know, let's say it's $500 a month or something. So part of that goes to the bank, and then the other part comes to us in that total? So, because if they're delinquent, this is the delinquent to the bank?
No.
But they're current with us, like, I'm just trying to clarify.
This is just to the bank. So the way our loans work is so long as they're using it as their primary residence, I mean, that's the biggest
Right.
condition, then each month we forgive what their payment would be. So they don't owe us anything yet, although them being in default under this, we could technically send out a notice of default and say, you're in default and your loan with us is going to mature if you don't get this
Right.
cured, and then they would owe our loan back.
So in the spirit of it, this loan amount that is outstanding, the 165, if they were to stay in the house and just keep current on their mortgage, we're not going to get that back anyway.
Right.
Right.
That's one thing I wanted to clarify when
Right.
Brandon said it's technically 407,000, I think you said, that's owed
Yeah.
altogether. that 165 is already out the door. So, and as far as tying up funds currently, it would just be the portion that's owed to the bank that would be tied up
Right.
and cash out the door right now.
Right. So actually, if they were foreclosed on, then we'd actually recoup that money because it wouldn't be forgiven, and that money could then be put back in play for other people, is what I'm thinking.
Well, I guess for accounting purposes, it's already out the door, right? I mean, that was used to pay that.
Yeah, like Michael said, it's an asset currently on our
We're not going
books.
to get it back, the money, we would have to liquidate the house to
No,
get any
but-
money
but-
back.
right.
We would amortize it over the life.
If we got proceeds back from the foreclosure, we would put those proceeds back into the,
Into the program.
Right, and then help other potential,
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think that's consistent with the spirit and the characterization of the market and the characterization of the program that we heard from Dr. Jones earlier, that there is a market for it, there is a waiting list. That's what the money is there for. And so I think you're,
I would also say, and Max, you'd probably know this better than me, but if we allowed the bank to foreclose, they really don't have any incentive but to get their portion of the loan back,
Right,
right? So
right.
we're kind of putting our money at risk,
right,
I would say.
right. Okay. So we have a motion on the table, and we have a second. Do we have any other discussion?
We need public comment first?
yeah.
There you go, I like it, I like it.
Can we repeat the motion?
Well, I believe the motion is to expend the funds to 516185 to give our lessors a little more time to get caught up.
Can I
Is that
just add
plenty?
a note? Yeah, I would just maybe change instead of saying it being 5165, because if you can't pay them till tomorrow and it like goes
Yeah,
up by a couple
that's
bucks,
Okay,
you know, but by the end of this week or however.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
and I would also, while it's not part of the motion, I would characterize an expectation that staff would bring back to you at the next regular meeting an update and a strategy for following up with those, because we've created now an additional obligation for these homeowners, and we need a strategy going forward for recovery of that amount. And, we need to lay those ground rules up front so that we've got
Yeah,
a
Michael,
process.
that does, we have set a precedent here, so, yeah, we need to have a plan.
Good point.
And I also want to point out, I mean, this also, our action here kind of relies on the cooperation of the bank. So if we call them today and say, okay, we're ready to pay this, and we don't hear back from them, and then tomorrow we try and call them again, and they say, oh, no, we want to go ahead and accelerate, then, I mean, I can't force them to take our money. I don't see why they wouldn't. But if they are intent on being done with these loans and foreclosing and stuff, I mean, that could be an action they're going to take. That's not what I've heard from
Right.
their counsel, but they could.
We would need another special meeting for that then.
Brandon, did I hear you say something about a 21-day notice being posted somewhere?
Yeah, so,
So if they decide to accelerate, they will have to post that, right?
yeah.
And we will have notice we'll have another meeting before that 21 days expires, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss another one of those options if we feel we need to go another route to protect the assets and the integrity of the program.
Two quick questions, or one statement. I believe that should we need to, another special meeting would be appropriate, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be necessary. The other is just to make sure, budget-wise, approved expenditures, we're in good shape on the finance side?
Yes, the Affordable Housing Program currently has $553,000 in their expenditure budget.
Very good, thank you.
Would this action require approval of city council to expend these funds?
I knew that question was coming. I don't, this is a ballot approved program, so my position would be no, because it's already been approved as affordable housing, so long as we're using it as that. I mean, each one of these properties, when we close on them, they don't come before you guys and then before council. I mean, it's already approved under the ballot, so I don't think so.
Okay.
And then just, I guess out of curiosity, I've been on the board 5.5 years now, and I don't recall this having been an issue in the time that I've been on the board. Has there been a precedent then, or have we've experienced this before in several years that none of us on the board are aware of?
These are the first notices I've gotten, and they just showed up on my desk one day. I don't know how I got them. I think Mari would probably know more about that.
I've been involved in this for going on 13 years, and I can remember one or maybe two others other than this group.
Okay. And again, I am in alignment with the spirit of what we're trying to do. My concern would be just setting a precedent of, hey, it's okay to run behind and we're going to bail you out. So I think to Director Mantu's point, I think, subsequent to this, we need to have a plan and a strategy of how to deal with it, and maybe a policy to look at. So I think we'll be clear, and if this motion passes, that this is a one-time deal, and we're not by any means trying to set a precedent. But we obviously, with the spirit of the program, trying to help those that need it at this time. Okay. So any public comment on this? See none, then we'll.
Michael, I would probably be in favor of a plan going forward that says that we would take it case by case, which allows us to look at special circumstances without setting a precedent.
Okay, thank you. Okay. With that said, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Then for item B, consideration and possible action to designate an authorized representative to execute all closing and related documents for affordable housing programs properties. Presentation by Bob Salas.
Well, I'm going to do this one too. This is hopefully easier, but since we're talking about affordable housing, I thought I'd go ahead and bring it on this one. This board has previously adopted the program policies and procedures for affordable housing, and that policy makes it clear staff administers the programs, they prepare closing documents and things of that nature. But what's unclear to me is that at closing, there's a few documents that get signed, and traditionally the director has been signing those documents. With the discussion with bylaws we've been having recently and stuff, and since the bylaws say the board president signs everything, I wanted to bring this to clarify who should be signing stuff. And I think it may be easier to make it the director or even Bob, because a lot of times these closings happen kind of in short order. So,
Brandon, would you clarify which Bob you're talking about?
Bob Salas, sorry. He's the one that does the affordable housing program for the most part. So having him designated or having the economic development director would be good, or just keeping it board president needs to sign those documents, that's fine too. But the other part of this is also when a borrower refinances one of these loans, the new lender will ask us to re-subordinate our loan, which in our deed of trust, we already do. Because we're the second lien holder, we subordinate to the primary. And we say in there that any renewals, extensions, amendments will also be subordinate. But that hasn't been good enough for some lenders that are doing these refinances, and so they ask us to sign a new agreement. And so I want to be clear who should be signing those, or if at all, whether y'all would want to see those come back, because I think our current lender, Pinnacle, they comply with the program requirements, but like in one instance, we had Rocket Mortgage did one, and I don't know that they meet all the requirements or if we require them to do that or not. I mean, they're just taking over they're paying off the original lender, and then they're issuing their own new loan. So
You just want action that says who's authorized to sign.
yeah, who's authorized to sign, and then in the cases of refinance, it's kind of up to y'all whether y'all would want to
Yeah, and you would recommend,
Subordination or not,
you would recommend either the director or Bob Salas?
yes.
Okay.
Would delegating that to someone not affiliated with the Development Corporation invalidate in any way the corporation's claim in a situation that we just discussed on the last item?
So the most important documents that get signed aren't signed by anyone anyways. The note and deed of trust, that's only signed by the borrower. Those are the most important things. The things that are signed are like the restrictive covenants on the property saying you gotta use it for affordable housing. And so maybe if we don't, I mean, if y'all designate someone, then no, I think that's valid. But if someone not designated were to sign those, then maybe they would have a claim that they don't apply because it wasn't authorized by the Development Corporation.
Aren't
But
they,
by delegating with action on this item, would we be covered on that?
Yes,
Okay,
that's why I'm
that
reading.
that satisfies my question.
So my question is Bob Salas's, would his services in this regard on behalf of the corporation, are they covered under the administrative services contract?
They are, and in the policy that I know the board has adopted in the past, and we've recently updated in August of last year, so.
Okay. So,
I think we're good with whatever the board wants. I think Brandon is raising the issue because he wants to see minuted action or a policy that gives clear authority one way or another.
yeah.
Do we have a staff recommendation whether it should be the Economic Development Director or the Affordable Housing Director?
I think we said Bob, but
I think we want a backup either way though, right?
Yeah.
We want a primary and
Yeah,
then
so-
somebody, for example, Bob's not available today, and if we had a document we needed to sign, we'd like a backup.
Yes, and just for the record, from my previous service as president of this board of directors, I can remember Nora calling me saying, we need a signature this afternoon, and it was like 3:30. Fortunately, at that time I was working downtown. So I do know that these things do move very quickly. I would go ahead and make the motion that we designate Bob Salas as the primary signator and the director, well, not Bob Salas particularly, but by title.
right.
And similarly by title, the economic development director for this corporation.
Second.
Any public comment? See none, any discussion from the board? Okay, see none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Motion carries. Cool, thank you, Brandon. And I think this goes kind of in the spirit of what we've been trying to do as a board, looking at the different policies and bylaws and agreements that we have in place. I think they've been in place for a long time, and I think it's due diligence on our part as a board of directors to review those documents on a regular basis. And I think that's another policy and program that we probably need to sink our teeth into a little bit as this year progresses, and see what is the optimum way of facilitating that program and protecting the funds that we're investing in those properties as well. So, okay. Well, then we'll move on to item 5, follow-up and administrative issues. A, announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Do we have any? No? Okay, with that, we'll consider a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have, was it Mantu? All right. First by Director Barrio, second by Director Mantu. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned, 9:19. Thank you, everyone.